a gentle invitation to rest the night, is quiet. Beyond your window, the world has slipped into a soft hush, and the stars are scattered like tiny lanterns themselves, shining above a sea you cannot see, but can somehow feel. Tonight, I'd like to take you somewhere far away, not far in miles, but far in time, to a place where the air smells faintly of salt, where a beam of warm golden light sweeps slowly across the water, and where a single man tends a lantern that must never go out. We are going to visit a lighthouse, not the kind bustling with tourists and cameras, but an older one, built of stone, worn smooth by centuries of wind. Its base is rooted in the rocks like an old tree, and its top holds the great glass eye that watches over the night sea. Inside lives the lighthouse keeper. He is not in a rush. He has no clock pressing him forward. The waves mark his hours, and the lantern is his constant companion. So, settle in. Rest your hands loosely in your lap, or lie back if you wish. Let the rhythm of the ocean carry you. And as I speak, let yourself drift with the tide of the story, because this is the tale of the lighthouse keeper's lantern. The keeper's quiet life. The lighthouse keeper's mornings are not like ours. He does not wake to an alarm clock, nor rush through a list of tasks before sunrise. Instead, he rises when the faint light of dawn slips gently through the small, round window of his quarters. The bed he sleeps in is narrow, with a heavy wool blanket to keep the sea chill away. The stone walls around him are thick, and they hold the memory of the night's coolness even as the morning begins. He stretches slowly, listening to the faint sound of gulls calling somewhere beyond the glass. The waves, too, are there, rhythm never changing, a soft, endless breath against the rocks below. Before anything else, he checks the lantern. Even in the morning, its glass panels must be clean. The brass fittings must shine, for salt and wind will always try to claim them. There is a small spiral staircase that winds upward from his living quarters to the lantern room. The steps are narrow, the iron railing cool beneath his fingers. Each step creaks faintly as he climbs, a sound he has known for so many years that it feels almost like part of the building's voice. When he reaches the top, he unlocks the small hatch and steps inside. The lantern is still warm from the night's flame. The great glass lenses, perfectly cut to gather light and throw it across the sea, gleam softly in the dawn outside. The horizon is a pale silver. Fishing boats are already making their way out, tiny dark shapes moving slowly toward the deep water. The keeper nods to them, even though they cannot see him. He knows most of their names and the families who wait for them on shore. With a soft cloth, he wipes the glass clean. The smell of oil and metal is familiar, comforting even. Everything in this place has a purpose. Every bolt, every hinge, every gear is part of the single task, keeping the light alive. The slow morning. Once the lantern is tended to, the keeper begins his slow walk back down the spiral stairs. The sound of his boots on the iron steps is a quiet and steady rhythm, a little echo that circles the inside of the lighthouse. Below, the rooms are still dim, lit only by the pale spill of morning light from the small windows in the kitchen, which is really just a corner of the main room. A kettle waits on a black iron stove. The stove is warm from the fire he kept burning through the night. He sets the kettle over the coals, listening to the faint hiss as the metal warms. There is no hurry here. The water will boil when it's ready. While he waits, he sits at the small wooden table, running his hand over the smooth surface worn by years of use. Sometimes he will take out his logbook, a thick leather-bound book that holds neat rows of handwriting. Every day he records the weather, the ships he has seen, and any small events worth noting. The entries are quiet, simple things: wind from the east, light rain, 3 fishing boats passed before dawn, seagulls nested on the north ledge. When the kettle begins to hum, he pours the hot water into a heavy ceramic mug, letting the steam curl upward into the air. The smell of tea fills the room, earthy and familiar. Outside the small window, he can see the tide shifting. The rocks that were hidden last night are beginning to show their dark, wet shapes again. Seaweed clings to them like green ribbons. The keeper sips his tea slowly, letting the warmth spread through him. His mornings are not filled with noise, but with these small, steady moments. He has come to think of them as the truest form of company. The shore at midday. By the time the tea is finished, the sun has risen high enough to fill the lighthouse with pale gold light. The stones of the walls seem to hold that brightness for a while, and the keeper opens the heavy wooden door at the base to let the air in. Outside, the scent of the sea is stronger, fresh, with a faint edge of salt that clings to the skin. The cry of the gulls is sharper here, cutting through the steady hush of the waves. The wind, though gentle, tugs at his coat and plays in his hair. There is a narrow path that leads down from the lighthouse to the rocky shore. It twists and winds, sometimes disappearing beneath seagrass, then reappearing in the dark, flat stones. Nearer the water, he walks it slowly, noticing small things: a shell wedged into a crack in the rock, the mark of a crab's claw in the damp sand, the way the sea foam gathers in tiny white islands that drift and dissolve. The tide is low. Now, tide pools have formed in the hollows between stones, still as glass, with tiny worlds living inside them. Here, a cluster of barnacles; there, a slow-moving snail, its shell patterned like an old marble. The keeper crouches beside one of the pools, resting his elbows on his knees. He has seen these same pools through countless seasons, sometimes iced over in winter, sometimes full of darting silver fish in summer. Today they are quiet, reflecting the sky in soft ripples. Far out on the water, a larger ship moves slowly across the horizon. Its sails are faint and pale against the blue, and he knows that it will pass beyond sight in an hour or so. He makes a mental note to record it in the logbook later. For now, he simply sits on a sun-warmed rock, listening to the rhythm of the waves as they roll forward and fall back, over and over, as if the sea is breathing. Afternoon tasks: when the sun is higher, the keeper rises from his place on the shore and walks the winding path back up to the lighthouse. The climb is not steep, but it is steady, and the stones beneath his boots feel warm now from the midday light. Inside, the air is cooler. The thick walls guard the quiet, muting the sound of the gulls outside. The keeper removes his coat, folding it neatly over the back of a wooden chair, and sets about the small but constant work that keeps the lighthouse alive. There is brass to polish the hinges of the lantern room, the fittings on the oil lamp, the handles of the storage cabinets. He works slowly, a soft cloth in one hand, a tin of polish in the other. The smell is faintly metallic, and the gentle circular motion of his hands is almost like a meditation. He checks the rope that hangs in a neat coil near the door. It is thick, its fibers rough but strong. Though it has not been used in weeks, he runs his hands along it carefully, searching for any sign of wear. Everything here must be ready, not for the calm days, but for the nights when the wind will try to tear the world apart. A small wooden box sits on a shelf. holding the spare wicks for the lamp. Each one is wrapped in paper to keep it dry. The keeper unwraps one just to feel the weave between his fingers. He knows exactly how it will burn, how it will draw the oil upward, steady and sure, so long as it is trimmed just right. By the time these tasks are done, the light through the window has shifted. The sun now leans toward the west, and the long shadows begin to stretch across the stone floor. The keeper steps outside once more, just to stand for a while on the narrow ledge and feel the afternoon wind. It is softer now, carrying the faint scent of seaweed and wood. He closes his eyes, and for a few quiet moments, there is nothing at all to do but breathe. Preparing for evening, the afternoon drifts by without urgency. The keeper moves through the lighthouse as if the building itself breathes in time with him. He listens to the faint crackle of the stove cooling, to the gentle hum of the wind as it weaves through the narrow gaps in the shutters. He makes himself a simple meal, bread, baked 2 days ago, still soft in the center, and a wedge of pale cheese that holds the taste of the pasture. Alongside it, a cup of tea, this one brewed stronger than in the morning, its steam curling upward in lazy spirals. He eats at the small table, not quickly, but with the slow attention that comes when there is nothing waiting to rush him onward. Through the open window, he can hear the sound of the tide turning again, the low rumble of waves rolling over one another. When the last bite is gone, he sets the plate aside and takes up the oil can. It is time to ready the great lantern for the night ahead. The spiral stairs wind upward once again, and he climbs them at the same unhurried pace as always. The metal railing is cool against his palm, though the air here has grown warmer as the day's sunlight lingers in the walls. In the lantern room, the glass lenses catch the fading afternoon light, bending it into soft rainbows that stretch across the floor. The keeper steps carefully among them, as though not to disturb the colors. He checks the oil reservoir first, lifting the lid with practiced hands. The lamp will burn for many hours tonight, but only if it is fed well. He pours the oil slowly, watching the surface rise until it sits just below the brass lip. Then he trims the wick, a small, deliberate motion, the snip of the scissors sounding almost loud in the hush of the room. A clean edge will mean a steady flame, one that will not flicker or smoke. Outside the glass, the sky has deepened into a muted gold, and the first star has begun to appear in the cool blue above the horizon. The keeper takes a long breath, feeling the shift of the day in his chest. Night is on its way, and with it, the lantern must be ready to guide the sea. Lighting the lantern, the sun is low now, hovering just above the line where sea meets sky. The water has taken on the colors of the evening, deep blue in the shadows, and gold where the light still lingers. The air has cooled, carrying a faint scent of salt and damp stone. The keeper moves quietly in the lantern room. He opens the small drawer in the wooden cabinet and takes out a box of matches. They are kept dry and wrapped in waxed paper, for the damp air here will claim anything left unguarded. He stands before the great lamp, its brass polished to a warm glow. For a moment, he looks out over the horizon. The last fishing boat is making its way home, its wake catching the last streaks of sunlight. Then, with a practiced motion, he strikes the match. It flares softly, not harsh or hurried, but with a gentle bloom of light. He touches it to the wick, and the flame takes hold, curling upward, settling into a steady, golden glow. The lenses surrounding the lamp catch that glow, bend it, and send it out into the darkening air. Slowly, as the great gears begin to turn, the beam sweeps across the sea. a patient arc of light that touches the waves, the rocks, and the distant horizon. The keeper closes the hatch to the lamp, making sure the seals are tight. He listens for the steady hum of the mechanism, the faint click of the gear teeth as they turn. It is the sound of safety, of countless nights spent keeping the same watch. Outside, the first gulls have fallen silent, and the soft rustle of night birds has begun. The lighthouse now stands like a sentinel in the growing dark, its lantern sending out its measured heartbeat of light again and again, never rushing, never failing. The keeper leans on the railing, watching the beam make its slow journey over the water. Somewhere far out at sea, a sailor might see it tonight and know the shore is near. That thought is enough to make him smile, alone though he may be. The night watch begins darkness, comes quietly here. It does not rush in all at once, but drapes itself slowly over the sea and the rocks, layer by layer, until the day has slipped away entirely. The lantern's beam now shines brighter against the black water, each sweep of light revealing a silver crest on a distant wave, or the pale glimmer of sea spray. From far below, the sound of the surf grows deeper, as if the night air has thickened the voice of the ocean. The keeper moves through the lantern room with care. Every hour or so, he checks the oil, makes sure the wick is burning clean, and listens to the turning of the great gear. Between these rounds, he sits in the small chair tucked near the narrow window, where he can see the water stretching endlessly into the dark. The night air is cool on his face. He pulls his coat a little tighter around him and lets his gaze rest on the steady path of the beam. It sweeps across the waves like a hand gently brushing over their surface, again and again. Sometimes he hears the distant call of a night bird or the faint creak of the lighthouse itself as it shifts slightly in the wind. These sounds are as familiar to him as the sound of his own breathing. The keeper's thoughts wander slowly, moving no faster than the tide. He thinks of the ships that might be out there now, sails furled tight against the breeze, a single lantern glowing on their decks. He imagines the sailors glancing toward the shore and catching sight of his beam, trusting it to guide them safely past the rocks. Hours pass in this way, though it is hard to measure them. Time here is not counted in minutes, but in the steady, faithful turning of the light at intervals. He descends the spiral staircase to check the doors, making sure each is latched against the wind. The lower rooms are cool and shadowed, lit only by the faint glow from the small windows. Sometimes he will pause there, listening to the muffled roar of the sea through the thick stone. Then it is back up to the lantern room, where the flame waits, bright and steady. The night is long, but the keeper does not mind. It is his task to keep the light alive until the morning returns. The long hours before dawn midnight at the lighthouse feels different from any other time. The world beyond the windows is almost entirely dark, save for the steady turning beam and the faint shimmer of moonlight on the water. Even the wind seems to soften here, as though it too is resting. The keeper sits in the lantern room for a while longer, hands folded loosely in his lap, eyes following the slow rhythm of the light. Every few minutes, he glances toward the flame to make sure it burns clean, the wick glowing with that steady golden hue he has come to know so well. Sometimes he hears the groan of the gears below, a sound that is not alarming but simply part of the lighthouse's old language. He knows each creak and hum by heart, and any change in their tone would call him to attention instantly. But tonight, everything speaks in its familiar way. When the flame is steady, he rises and walks the circle of the lantern room, looking out in every direction. To the east, The sea is a black expanse broken only by faint lines of silver. To the south, the coastline curves gently, and a single house window glows like a small star on the land. To the north, only the restless water and the jagged shadow. Of rocks, satisfied, he descends the winding stairs again. The sound of his boots on the steps is hollow, echoing upward into the dark above him. At the bottom, he checks the outer door, still bolted, still firm against the night air. In the small kitchen, he pours a little water into a kettle and sets it on the stove. There is no hurry. The coals are low, and the water will warm in its own time. While it heats, he slices a piece of bread and eats it slowly, listening to the faint sigh of the wind against the walls. When the tea is ready, he takes it back upstairs, settling again in his chair near the window. The warmth of the mug is welcome in his hands. Outside, the moon is sinking toward the horizon, and a faint light, too pale to be dawn, rests along the edge of the sea. The hours ahead will pass in the same way, small checks of the lamp, moments of stillness by the window, listening to the sea breathe in the dark. He knows that at last the first hint of day will arrive, and with it, the quiet satisfaction of another night's watch complete. The first light of dawn. The night has been long, but in its quiet way it has also been gentle. Now, as the hours slip toward morning, there is a subtle change in the air. It is not sudden. There is no sharp line between night and day here. Instead, the dark begins to thin, as though some hidden hand is washing it away with slow, careful strokes. Far on the horizon, the deep black of the sea shifts into a muted grey. The stars, bright only moments ago, fade one by one until they are only memories against the sky. The lantern's beam seems to shine farther in this half-light, stretching across the water as if reluctant to give up its watch. The keeper rises from his chair and walks once more around the lantern room. The flame still burns steadily, its golden light warm against the cool blue of the early morning. He checks the oil. Enough remains to carry the light until the day is fully here. From the narrow window, he watches as the first line of pale gold touches the edge of the world. The sea catches it instantly, turning the ripples into small coins of light that dance and vanish as the waves move. Below, the rocks glisten, still wet from the tide. A single gull cries out, its voice carrying clearly in the still air. It is the first sound of the new day, and it makes the keeper smile. He stands for a while longer, letting the warmth of the lamp rest on his face as the light outside grows stronger. The horizon becomes a wash of soft colors, grey into gold, gold into a faint clean blue. When it is clear that the sun will rise without trouble, he reaches for the wick trimmer. The moment is always quiet, a pause, a breath, and then the flame is pinched, curling into a last wisp of smoke that drifts upward through the still air. The beam fades, and the lantern room fills only with daylight. Another night's watch has ended, and the keeper knows that his work will begin again in just a few hours. Morning, after the watch with the lamp extinguished, the lantern room feels different. It is no longer the heart of the night, casting its steady glow into the dark, but simply a bright, glass-walled space filled with the clean light of morning dot. The keeper opens the hatch to let in the cool air. It smells of salt and wet stone, and somewhere far below, the tide is moving in again. He takes a deep breath, letting it clear the faint scent of lamp oil from his mind. From a small shelf near the wall, he takes a folded cloth and begins to clean. Every surface of the lamp, from the brass fittings to the curved glass lenses, is wiped free of soot and salt. This is not hurried work. The cloth moves in slow, steady circles, and the light plays gently on the polished metal. Part 12. Walking the short, the keeper steps outside, pulling the heavy wooden door closed behind him. The hinges creak softly, and the sound drifts away almost at once into the morning air. The wind is light now, carrying only the faintest temps of salt. The sun, still low in the sky, casts a golden sheen across the water, making the surface look like rippled glass. He stands for a moment on the narrow stone platform, looking out at the horizon where the sea and sky meet in a pale, hazy line. The path down to the shore is familiar beneath his boots, the same winding way he has walked hundreds, perhaps thousands, of times. Seagrass sways gently along the edges, its tips still damp with morning dew. The stones, cool in the shade of the cliffs, grow warmer and smoother as the path opens to the sun. Down on the shore, the tide is halfway in. Waves lap softly at the rocks, breaking into thin fans of foam that disappear as quickly as they form. He moves slowly, stepping from stone to stone, pausing often to notice the small worlds left by the retreating water, tiny pools where limpets cling and strands of green weed drift lazily. A gull passes overhead, its shadow gliding across the rocks before melting into the sea. In the distance, the muffled thud of waves against a hidden reef adds its rhythm to the morning's calm. The keeper finds a flat rock, warmed by the rising sun, and sits with his hands resting loosely on his knees. From here, he can see the lighthouse. Above him, its white stone bright against the sky, the lantern room glinting faintly in the light. It stands the way it always has, solid and watchful. And in that sight there is a kind of comfort. He stays there for a long while, letting the sound of the sea fill the space between thoughts. There is no need to hurry back. The day is his to tend as he wishes, and the next night's work still feels far away. The slow afternoon, by late morning, the tide is turned once more. The water pushes gently up against the rocks, curling around them as if testing their shape, before sliding back into itself. The keeper rises from his place on the flat stone and begins the walk back toward the lighthouse. The sun is higher now, and the wind off the sea carries a little more warmth. Above him, the walls of the lighthouse glow pale in the light, the shadows of the railings tracing thin lines across the stone. Inside, the air is cool again. He hangs his coat neatly by the door and sets about the quiet work that fills the hours between watches. There is no fixed order to these tasks. He does them as they come to mind, guided more by habit than by any plan. First, he checks the rope coils in the storeroom. Each is hung on its own peg, kept dry and free from tangles. He runs his fingers along the fibers, searching for any fray or weakness. When he finds a loose strand, he trims it neatly and twists the fibers back into place. Next, he oils the hinges of the upper door. The smell of the oil is sharp but not unpleasant, and the hinges move more smoothly when he's finished. He pauses there for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the sea outside and the occasional creak of the building in the breeze. From the shelf beside the stove, he takes down a small wooden box. Inside are the tools he uses to maintain the lantern's workings, a small brush for dust, a pair of brass scissors for the wick, a polished screwdriver for the fittings. He examines each tool, making sure it is clean and ready for the evening. As the light in the room shifts toward the softer tones of afternoon, he brews another cup of tea. This one is lighter, its steam curling upward in the stillness. He drinks it by the small window, watching the gulls wheel in slow circles over the tide. These hours are quiet, filled with nothing urgent, and the keeper has learned to treasure them. The work here is never truly done, but it moves at the same unhurried pace as the sea. The approach of evening, the afternoon stretches, as if it does not wish to end. The light begins to soften, turning the stone walls outside a warmer shade of grey. The keeper sets aside the last of his tasks and steps out onto the narrow walkway that circles the tower. From here he can see far out across the water, where the horizon blurs gently into the sky. The waves are calm tonight, small ridges of water moving in steady lines toward the rocks below. The air carries a hint of coolness now, the kind that speaks of night approaching. He breathes it in slowly, filling his lungs with the clean, salt-heavy scent. Somewhere far off, a fishing boat makes its quiet way toward the harbor, its sail a small triangle of pale cloth in the distance. Back inside, he climbs the spiral staircase toward the lantern room. The steps are worn smooth in the center, polished by countless ascents and descents over the years. Each footstep has its own small echo, fading upward into the glass chamber above. When he reaches the lantern room, he pauses for a moment to look out over the view, the sea, the rocks, the faint outline of the coast beyond, all bathed in the dimming gold of late day. It is a view he has seen hundreds of times, and yet it never seems to lose its stillness. The lantern itself rests in its frame, silent for now, its polished glass glinting faintly in the low light. He runs a cloth gently over the glass, removing the thin trace of salt spray that has found its way in during the day from a shelf by the wall. He takes the lantern's oil can. The metal is cool in his hand, and the faint smell of oil mingles with the scent of the sea drifting through the open vents. He checks the reservoir, adding just enough to be sure it will burn without fail through the night. As he works, the room fills with the slow rhythm of his movements, the turning of small screws, the brushing away of dust, the trimming of the wick to a fine, even edge. Outside, the first hints of pink and lavender begin to touch the clouds. The day is quietly slipping away, and the lighthouse is ready to take its place as the steadfast watcher of the dark. The lighting of the lantern, the moment, comes quietly, as it always does. No bells or signals are needed, only the deepening of the sky and the soft retreat of the day's warmth. The keeper moves with unhurried care. From a small wooden drawer he takes a box of matches. The wood of the box is smooth, its corners rounded by years of use. It makes the faintest whispering sound as he slides it open. He selects one match, holding it for a moment between his fingers, feeling the texture of the wood. Then, with a gentle strike against the side, it flares to life. The flame is small, yet in the cool, shadowy room, it feels warm and alive. He shields it with his hand, guiding it to the wick. The lantern accepts the flame instantly, and the light blooms, soft at first, then growing steadily brighter. The polished glass panels catch the glow, scattering it outward in quiet. Golden beams, the mechanism begins to turn slowly, each movement smooth and measured. Through the tall glass walls, the light reaches out across the water, casting its steady path toward the far horizon. The keeper watches for a moment, not to admire, but simply to confirm that the light burns clean, that the wick is even, that the rotation is true. Outside, the first stars have appeared, tiny points above the vast darkness of the sea. The horizon is no longer a line, but a meeting of deep blues and shadows. He closes the lantern room door softly behind him. the faint hum of the light remaining in the air like a promise. The night's work has begun, though most of it now belongs to the quiet turning of the mechanism, and the flames' slow, unwavering burn, descending the spiral stairs. He knows that in the distance, sailors will soon see this light, a sign, a guide, a familiar beacon that tells them they are not alone in the dark. The keeper's night watch, the tower settles into its nighttime rhythm. The faint creak of wood, the distant sigh of waves against the rocks, and the steady, gentle tick of the turning mechanism become the evening's only voices. The keeper makes his way to the small sitting room halfway down the tower. It is simple, a worn chair near the window, a narrow table, and a shelf with a few books, their pages softened and yellowed by salt air. He lowers himself into the chair with the kind of ease that comes from repeating a motion thousands of times before. From the table, he picks up a logbook and opens it slowly, its spine offering a quiet crackle by the lamplight beside him. He writes the date, the wind's direction, and the sea's temperament for the night. The handwriting is careful, measured, not hurried in the slightest. Every so often, he glances toward the window. Beyond it lies a calm stretch of sea, glittering faintly under a rising moon. The lighthouse's own beam sweeps rhythmically across the water, pausing on nothing, yet touching everything in turn. Time here moves differently. It is not measured in minutes, but in the slow turning of the lantern and in the steady movement of the tide. Hours can pass quietly, with only the soft rustle of a page or the occasional sound of the keeper pouring tea from a small tin pot into a heavy ceramic mug. The tea smells faintly of dried herbs, its warmth filling his hands as the night air presses coolly against the stone walls. Outside, a lone fishing boat drifts along the horizon, its small light bobbing in and out of sight. The keeper watches it for a while, not out of concern, but out of the shared understanding between those who work under the same night sky. When the clock in the corner softly strikes the hour, he marks the time in his logbook. No incidents, no storms, no ships in distress, just another calm night on the coast. The kind of night that passes so gently, one might almost forget it had happened at all. The sounds of the sleeping coast, the coastline rests now, as though the sea itself has tucked in for the night far below. The waves touch the rocks with soft, unhurried motions, not crashing, but brushing, like the hem of a robe sweeping across. Stone floors. From time to time, a gull calls faintly in the distance, its voice carried by the cool, damp wind. It is not the loud, demanding cry of daylight, but a drowsy murmur, as if even the birds know that night is not the time for urgency. The keeper steps outside onto the narrow balcony that wraps around the lantern room. The air here is different, thinner, sharper, filled with the scent of salt, and touched with the faint aroma of burning oil from the great lamp above. He leans on the railing, feeling the rough iron under his palms, and listens. There are layers to the night's music, the rhythmic pulse of the sea, the sigh of the wind through the rocks, the occasional splash of some unseen fish in the cove below. If one listens long enough, these sounds become familiar and strangely comforting. It is as if the coastline itself breathes in a slow, steady rhythm, and the lighthouse keeper has simply aligned his own heart to match it. Somewhere in the distance, the faint chime of a buoy bell marks the edge of the safe waters. Its tone is low, rounded, and perfectly spaced, a voice in the darkness that says simply, "I am here." The keeper stays outside just long enough to feel the cool air settle into his skin. Then he returns indoors, closing the heavy door with a slow, careful push so the latch makes no sudden sound. Inside, the warmth greets him again, wrapping gently around his shoulders, and the steady hum of the lamp's machinery becomes the quiet heartbeat of the tower. The lighthouse keeper's lantern, final chapters. The night has deepened now. The sky outside is an ink-blue expanse, sprinkled with faint, cold stars. The horizon has dissolved completely, so that the sea and sky are no longer two things, but one, a single, vast darkness where the beam of the lighthouse moves patiently in its great circle. Inside the lantern room, the keeper's shadow stretches and sways across the curved walls, shifting gently as the flame turns. He moves quietly, not because anyone might be woken, but because quiet simply feels right here. The tower itself seems to approve of silence. On a small table in the corner sits a pot of tea. Its steam curls upward, catching the lamplight before disappearing into the cool air. The tea is not strong, but mild, the kind that warms the hands and chest, leaving no sharpness behind. He pours it slowly, listening to the soft stream as it fills his cup. It is a small sound, but in the stillness of the tower it feels as large as a story. He sits by the window facing the open sea. From here, the beam of light is both above and beside him, spinning its wide halo over the waters. Every time it sweeps past, the glimmer touches the surface of his cup, as though the ocean's light has paused here, only for a moment, before carrying on. There is no urgency to drink. The tea will wait. Everything here waits. The rhythm of the sea allows no rush. Some nights, when the weather is calm like this, the keeper writes, not letters, for there is no one waiting for news of the lighthouse. No, he writes, in a small, leather-bound notebook, not about storms or passing ships, but about small things. The way the clouds moved that morning, the strange song of the wind at sunset, or the curious path of a spider he watched weave a web in the stairwell. The entries are quiet and unimportant, yet in writing them he preserves the soft edges of life that might otherwise dissolve into memory. Tonight he writes only one line. The sea is resting. Then he closes the book. Hours pass without him noticing. The flame turns, the gears hum, the night holds its stillness. The tide creeps inward, then begins its retreat. Eventually, a faint paling touches the eastern sky. It is not yet dawn, but the promise of it. The stars seem to fade in agreement, making room for the light that will come. The keeper stands and moves to tend the lamp one last time. He checks the wick, adjusts the glass, and wipes a small ring of condensation from the inside of the pane. Through that clear circle, he watches the first, delicate threads of morning reach across the water. He descends the spiral staircase slowly, one hand trailing along the wall for the pleasure of feeling its cool, stone curve beneath his palm. The steps echo gently, a soft sound that spirals down with him at the base. He steps outside. The air smells different now, less of night, more of wet grass and sea foam. The rocks below glisten in the pale light, and the sea has taken on a muted silver color. He walks to the edge of the cliff, where a narrow bench waits. It is worn smooth by years of salt air. Sitting there, he lets the morning arrive slowly. The sun breaks the horizon at last, casting a path of gold straight across the water to the base of the lighthouse. For a brief moment, it feels as if the tower itself is holding the light, offering it to the day. The keeper smiles faintly, though no one sees it. He has done what he came to do. The night has passed safely, and the light has watched over every inch of water it could touch. Soon, the world will wake. Boats will leave the harbor, voices will rise in the village, and gulls will fill the sky again. But for now, the sea is quiet, the land is quiet, and the keeper is quiet. He takes a final sip of his cooled tea, lets the cup rest on the bench beside him, and closes his eyes. The gentle wash of the waves is the last thing he hears before he allows himself to drift slowly into a light and peaceful sleep.